Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, marketing exec by day, AI experimenter by day, night, and basically every other waking moment in between at this point.
And I'm Kyle, your resident tech guru. I've spent the last decade building data systems, products, and AI tools that solve real-world problems. Each week, we'll break down AI concepts, tools, or trends that actually matter for your business.
So whether you're a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or you're just tech curious, let's dive in. Just think of us as your guides through the wild, wonderful, and sometimes completely overwhelming world of AI.
This is Early Adopter.
Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. So, Jess, how's your week been?
Well, Kyle, it's my favorite week of the year because it's Halloween week. I don't know if you knew this, but my birthday was this week. So I am
happy late birthday or
thank you.
early.
I am a
depending on when we
Halloween.
release.
I'm a Halloween baby. I've got multiple reasons for it to be my favorite week of the year. So this week I went for afternoon tea, which is like my
lovely
traditional birthday thing. And so I basically gorged myself on cake, which is always fun.
Nice.
And then I was out for dinner.
Which tea did you go to? What's your go-to spot?
The Wolsey. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's amazing.
One, no.
It's a really, really cool space. But also their tea is in my opinion better than the kind of more famous ones like Fortnum and Mason. Those ones are not. The actual quality is not great.
Hot take.
It is hot. It is hot take. It is. Those ones are really touristy. Anyway, and then I was out for dinner on Friday night, and I was just saying to you before the pod started, it's been a couple of years since I've been in the UK for Halloween, and I forgot how Halloween just isn't really a thing here. Like it's more so than it used to be. Like when I first moved here a million years ago, it definitely wasn't. But even now, it's nothing compared to what it is in the US. Like last year I was in Seattle for Halloween, but the year before that I was in New York, and New York at Halloween is absolutely insane. So I do kind of miss that because, as I've said, Halloween's my favorite week. But anyway, how was your week?
Yeah, well, I definitely did Halloween up this year. Last year I was, I think, pumpkin carving with my friend Dan and his family, and definitely Halloween felt a little more subdued than this year, where I went to the Halloween parade in WeHo on Friday night. And oh my goodness, that is a scene.
I can only imagine.
There's some great people watching.
I was going to say they go a little nuts for that in West Hollywood.
It was good. It was a lot of fun. Had a great time. Met up with a lot of friends. So that was great. And then I quickly followed that up with, I don't know if you can see this for our listeners who are just listening. I am wearing my Los Angeles Dodgers jersey
because
Game 7, baby, World Series. We are the champions back to back.
Congratulations.
So, my basically special shout out to my friends Eric and Lauren, who had to listen to me scream and be super stressed out while the game was happening. Not sure that was the most enjoyable experience for them. Their eardrums are probably a little shocked this morning, but man, I was excited. It's awesome.
Yeah, sounds like it. The other exciting news that we have for this week, Kyle, is that we have just hit 25 episodes.
Wow,
I know, which
crazy.
Is absolutely insane. It's really wild when you think about it. But I mean, we eventually went from kind of talking to ourselves to actually having listeners who tune into what we say, which is a crazy thing to experience.
Yeah, I mean, the topics have really evolved.
We really started with the foundational stuff, like the real basics, like what is prompt engineering or what is an AI agent, and that was all pretty beginner focused. And now I think we're really starting to talk about some more of the big picture stuff, which is very exciting. And I think that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in this episode, because we are going to be talking about something that is really going to change how commerce works, how e-commerce works, and how we've been online shopping.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited about our shift. I think we definitely took on a more educational tone early on to keep, to make sure that we all kind of were working from the same place. And I think we want to keep that. We talked about it. We want to keep educational components so everyone can learn along with us. But today, we're going to talk more about that strategic shift, like you mentioned. And I'm super excited about this. I know this is something that you're covering very closely.
I talk a lot about this in my day-to-day work.
So I think let's get into that. What I think
Mhm.
we're seeing happening right now is a rewiring of how digital commerce actually works under the hood.
Mhm.
So, and not just a new feature, but a new shift that changes who controls discovery, attention, which is a big
Mhm.
part of kind of our existing
Yep.
ecosystem. And ultimately, then that's going to really change the transaction flow.
So the thing that we are talking about is buy with ChatGPT or
Hmm.
instant checkout, which we've kind of referenced a couple of times in the last few weeks since it was announced. I think it was at the end of September, beginning of October.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's bigger than one feature,
Yeah.
and we're gonna put a. I'm not sure that we're gonna trademark this because I'm not sure we can. But this feature represents the beginning of what people are calling a two-tier internet.
I think it's important for us to cover because we're early adopters here and we want to talk about things, sooner
I
rather
love
than
when we
later.
drop that.
I
I love
know,
when
I
we
know.
drop
It
our
just it
little
works. It
name.
works so well. But there is a reason why it's important to talk about, and it's because if you sell online, if you buy online, or you're in the process of building anything, this is something that you really need to bear in mind because this is really going to be a game changer. Like, cannot
Hmm.
emphasize enough what a big deal this is going to be. We are going to start by introducing one of the most important concepts when it comes to this idea of two-tier internet, which we will get more into shortly. And this is the idea of conversational commerce. So this is a term that gets thrown around a fair bit, but it definitely means something quite different now than what it meant a couple of years ago.
Obviously, with ChatGPT,
Yeah,
changes a lot of the
sure
context
does.
of what we're talking about. So, conversational commerce at its core is when shopping and conversation collapse into the same interaction. You describe what you want to the AI, it shows you options and availability, and then you're able to purchase all within the same interface, which creates a much more frictionless environment.
Yeah.
For 20 plus years, e-commerce was fragmented. You search on Google, you can compare on Amazon, you might browse a brand's website, and then you buy somewhere. Amazon's done, I think, a better job than most in terms of trying to bring that all together, but still, it was fairly fragmented.
Yeah.
Different platforms, different user interfaces or experiences, different payment flows.
Mhm.
And again, there's been players like Stripe that have tried to unify that, but still, it's not quite all been in one.
Yeah.
And that fragmentation created power for the platforms that owned each piece. Google owned search, Amazon owned comparison. But now that journey is consolidated into one place. One platform controls discovery, curation, transaction, and probably encouragement too, right? Because we know there's
Yeah.
a little bit of that sycophantic aspect of AI. So,
Yeah, exactly. So we mentioned earlier that OpenAI launched instant checkout or buy with ChatGPT a few weeks ago at the end of September, beginning of October. They launched that with partners Etsy and Shopify is going to be on board soon. We'll go more into the details on this, but essentially, if you are a seller on Etsy or a seller on Shopify, this will be available to you. So that's just something to bear in mind that we're going to get more into shortly.
yeah. So, yeah, it is live right now. And once it scales across regions, it really is going to fundamentally rewire how online transactions are initiated and routed.
Yeah, because right now it is only available in the US. Um, but for me, the biggest news around this is that Walmart has announced that they will also be participating. And for me, this is really what signals the inflection point because Walmart has a 98% brand recognition with American consumers. They're the second largest online retailer behind Amazon with 65 billion in e-commerce sales. And they're putting instant checkout or buy with ChatGPT into production. So they are making their products available through this means of purchasing.
That is that mainstream adoption moment or that inflection point. Now, I will say, who is that 2% that doesn't recognize Walmart? I'd like to know that.
That's also a really good question.
What a wild number. But
What
anyway,
rock have you been living under?
exactly. But your point, I think, is super valid, which is companies like Walmart don't move into experimental territory all that often, especially if they're going to launch nationwide or store wide. They're only going to do that when something is proven and where they see massive strategic upside.
Yeah. And when a company that size commits, you know that things are shifting. And I think their strategic play here is pretty clear. They're securing a presence in a high traffic conversational interface as a defense against Google and Amazon. Because if they don't play in that ChatGPT shopping space, they're ceding discovery to OpenAI. So they lose control of that relationship, which is really what they care about.
Yeah, and I think that's going to change how brands think about customer relationships.
Yeah.
When discovery and transaction happen solely within ChatGPT, who owns that relationship, right?
Yep.
Probably not the brand.
Definitely not the brand.
Walmart still fulfills the order, but OpenAI owns the discovery moment. So that's a really interesting change in the power dynamic that didn't exist before.
Absolutely. And that is the reason why the fact that this is launched matters so much. As we've talked a lot about, we talked about it last week with AI browsers. ChatGPT has, 800 million weekly user base. It's not like it's niche. It's where people go to think now. They go to research, they go to discover, they go to make decisions. And this is where they will probably be able to go to transact.
It's that last mile. So the concentration of all of those user interactions is the real story.
Definitely.
That's a really powerful shift.
Yeah. And this is why we need to talk about it. It's not just oh, hey, this is cool. You can buy stuff in ChatGPT. Like there is an element for the average user of that. But I think if you're running a business, again, as we said, if you are selling online, if you are building a platform, all that stuff, this is going to be a really major shift in how people purchase. And that's why it's so important that we're talking about it now.
Absolutely.
But actually, conversational commerce isn't new. We've had voice assistants, we've had shopping chatbots, we've had recommendation engines for a really long time. Amazon Alexa lets you reorder stuff. Google has shopping features. So what about it makes this particular moment in time different? What's changed in this space?
Yeah, because what's emerging isn't really a shopping feature layered onto existing architecture. And those examples I was talking about before with Amazon or with Stripe, those were all existing infrastructure and layering on pieces to make it more, frictionless. But now this is the emergence of what we're calling that two-tier internet. And I feel like we should have added our sound effects on that and made it more dramatic again. But it really does tell the story of what is happening that's very different from everything in the past.
Yeah. We've talked about this quite a few times. I think we did actually try to get into it on another episode over the summer, and it turned out to be too much. So I'm glad we're finally able to talk about it because you and I have been talking about this for quite a few months. So let's start with tier one. So if you think of the first tier of the internet as the human internet, this is what we've known for the past 20 years. It's pretty visual. You can explore. It's kind of designed around attention and capturing that attention. So this is Google, this is Amazon, this is Etsy. They've all built themselves around that first tier layer. So you search, you can browse, you kind of stumble onto things, like you compare visually. That's the first tier. This is the internet that we've all been familiar with for the last 20 plus years.
Yep. And tier two completely flips that model, right? So it's not for humans to browse. It's for agents. Again, go back to our ladder of autonomy of agents, but it's for agents to act. The AI filters, it curates, and then transacts on your behalf, collapsing that decision stack from minutes to seconds. And sometimes more autonomously, right? Or based on an objective that you're giving it. So no browsing, no visual comparison. You describe what you need in natural language. The AI handles all the filtering and evaluation, and then the transaction happens. So it's a completely different interface for a completely different type of decision making. And there's a great example of this. Do you remember there's a story back in the day where two agents started talking to each other, and at one point they realized that they were agents, and they started talking in a completely different language that wasn't natural?
Yeah,
so
I do remember that.
This is effectively it's kind of like, this is what that is going to become. You have a world of agents speaking to each other in a language we don't know.
Yeah, which is a whole thing. Yeah, exactly. A thing in itself. But anyway, but I think the really important thing to reiterate is that the second tier, the agent tier, is not going to replace the first tier. It's not going to replace the human internet that we are used to, because you're still going to want to browse things sometimes, right? You're still going to want to, like if I'm looking for, a birthday present for someone, Sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
have something really specific in mind. Sometimes you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you're just going to look on Etsy for inspiration because you don't know exactly what you want and you still want it. It's like window shopping, right? You're still going to want to
Yeah.
window shop. That's why people still like to go to physical retail
Yeah.
outlets, because sometimes you don't know exactly what you want. So you're still going to be browsing. That won't go
Mm-hmm.
away.
And I think that's key, that they're coexisting. And a good, piece of evidence for this, that it's not going away, is, look at how ChatGPT released Atlas. They wouldn't be spending money and investing time into that type of interface if they weren't expecting us to continue to have that or need that browsing behavior.
Totally.
But what I think is very different is, or an interesting shift, is they're not being built as an evolution of the same thing, right? So it's not standing on top of what we've known before. They're being built as parallel infrastructures. And so they're accepting or acknowledging that these are different modes entirely. It's not about better browsing. It's a completely different game with a totally different objective. And kind of, as that example alludes to, a different language being spoken.
Exactly. So the old model, tier 1, was you search for something, you browse, you compare, you decide, you purchase. That's all built around human behavior and human behavioral patterns. So you visually scan things, you stumble across something that you maybe hadn't thought of, you compare. Comparison's a really big one, is whether it's comparing deals or comparing colors or, whatever it is. And then you go to the site, whether it's Amazon or if you choose not to support Amazon, which I get it. Whatever eBay, whatever site you're going on to, you try and find that one thing and then you end up finding 3 other things you didn't know you needed. Like that, that actually had a purpose. That is how humans behave and how they've always shopped. They're just doing it online.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good point that is the model inherently, encourages you to find those random things.
Totally.
But,
so spend the money that you didn't think you were going to spend.
Yeah, how do we do it, right? You read reviews across multiple tabs. You look at related products. You see customer Q&A or reviews. And, if you're anything like me, you change your mind 50 times over before you finally get to something.
Yep.
That's all friction, but it gave you choice and optionality. The friction was inherent to actually force you or encourage you to maybe buy the things that were going to generate revenue for these large giants. But ultimately, you were engaged in that discovery process.
Yeah, you as the human were engaged in that discovery process. Now you contrast that with the agent-mediated commerce. So essentially, in the ChatGPT interface, you tell the AI exactly what you want. It filters through, 50,000 options down to the 3 most relevant ones. And you do that by giving context. You tell it colors, you tell it sizes, you tell it dimensions, all that stuff. You pick which one you want, and then you buy, again, all within that chat interface. So it's super easy, super frictionless. 15 seconds total. Like, you don't have that browsing. You don't have that stumbling across something. You don't have that kind of additional discovery. It's all just super efficient. You've probably experienced something like this with Amazon, where you see, you just need to reorder something and all of a sudden you're like, that literally took me 30 seconds. So that sort of feeling.
Yeah, and I think that utilitarian shopping is really interesting. Obviously, the example of you just buy something again, great. But maybe, if there's stuff you've bought in the past or things that are very, you just kind of need, you don't want to deal with a lot of the friction, that
like
agent tier.
Light bulbs or something.
Yeah, that agent tier is going to be great, right? I just need some socks, some black socks, right? You don't need to browse a lot of options. You just want to get something that's good, that's based on your needs. Why would you want that friction ultimately?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you just need the efficiency. But for high consideration purchases, or for something that's really like emotionally driven, like when I was, searching for my new furniture, like that browsing tier is still where it's going to happen, because you still want to see the clothes on the models. You still want to, compare the furniture side to side. You want to see the different options that are available. You want to be inspired. You want to see that styling, all of those things that kind of help you mentally figure out exactly what you want. That still is going to be there. And that is still the kind of primary objective, I think.
Yeah, I think there's an objective lens to it. There's also like a user type lens,
Yeah. Not everyone's going to want the agent tier.
Or some of us are going to want the agent tier a lot, right? I don't really want to get too involved in the whole shopping experience. So I'm like, just give me the thing I need. But that's ultimately, this 2-tier kind of supports both type of user experiences. And so I think we're moving toward a world where consumers can move fluidly between those different experiences or modes, depending on context, their own personal preference, or if they're buying something that has a specific behavior, right? So quick utilitarian purchases can go through agents, if that makes sense. Exploratory, high consideration purchases can stay in the browsing layer or not, depending on who you are. But both tiers scale and operate simultaneously, which is really interesting.
And it's pretty unprecedented, right? We've never had this sort of two competing parallel e-commerce infrastructures operating at scale. And I think it's, as you say, it's interesting because they are addressing completely different human behavior. And that's really interesting. So I think the question isn't which one's going to win. It won't be one or the other. It's going to be how do they reshape things and how do businesses respond to this?
Mm-hmm. But here's the irony. The giants who dominated the first internet, Google and Amazon, right? Clear winners. They're optimized for attention and ad-driven discovery. And as we talked about, that model introduces purposeful friction. While you're deciding, you're shown more options that monetize that journey. Agent here flips that incentive. It rewards precision and outcome quality, not necessarily clicks.
Yeah, exactly. Like Google's entire business is built on this idea of browsing. You know, they make money on clicks and ads. And if that agent tier takes, I don't know, 20 or 30% of the transactional volume, that's revenue that they as Google lose. It's one of the reasons why we were talking about the AI browsers and the difference with that last week. You know, OpenAI doesn't really have that conflict. They're building that agent tier from scratch with nothing to defend. So for them, that's a pretty big competitive advantage.
Yeah, and the crazy part is that's probably the majority of shopping. Most people aren't browsing for fun. They're solving a problem.
Some people are, but a lot of people are not.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, you know, if you're trying to buy running shoes, right? You know,
oh God, yeah.
Like that can be crazy.
Or again, that furniture. I cannot tell you how long I spent trying to find that.
So if you could go back and not have all that friction and just find the exact thing you wanted, how great would that have been?
The dream.
Yeah.
But I think this is where the power shift really happens. You know, for 20 years, Google and Amazon kind of owned that human browsing layer. They really controlled everything. They were the gatekeepers of how consumers find things. And even, you know, like we're picking on Amazon and Google, but Etsy, you know, anything, eBay, anything that they all have their own specific marketplaces. But now this kind of second internet is where the Googles of the world, they don't own the interface at all. And that's what's the really interesting part of this.
Yeah. ChatGPT owns it now. Or more broadly, you know, conversational agents own it. So, you know, those 800 million plus or, you know, on ChatGPT, they're already there thinking, researching, discovering, you know, and now, as we've said, it's where they transact. So it's just a different customer journey entirely from the browsing layer.
Totally. And so the reason why, if we just come back to why we wanted to talk about this in the first place, because this two-tier internet does play into the conversational commerce conversation. Say that 3 times fast. You know, it's not just about ChatGPT launching this shopping feature. It's about these two fundamentally different architectures serving different types of commerce decisions, and they're coexisting at the same time. So it's really about how you as business owners, as retailers, all that, how you operate within this new system.
Yeah. So let's break down the technical side and kind of dig into the weeds just a little bit, just to kind of peel back the layers if we can. I think that will expose some of the real constraints and maybe some where, you know, some opportunities might exist for our audience.
Totally. I think ChatGPT even sell this as a simple integration, and it's actually not quite as simple as they're making it out to be.
Classic marketing, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So here's what's actually happening. I mean, it's not like this is revolutionary, but let me break this down a little bit. So you're in ChatGPT. I'm going to give an example here that I think is great, but because it's very Etsy-like. Hand-thrown ceramic mug, minimalist design, around $25 or pounds or wherever you're calling in from.
Dollars right now because it's only available in the US.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Good point. That's a important distinction. ChatGPT surfaces products from the partnered merchants. So Etsy today, Shopify eventually, which is very exciting for I know a lot of businesses that are on Shopify.
Definitely.
And then the user can tap buy. So they'll confirm shipping and payment inside the chat, and then complete a single item checkout without ever leaving the conversation. So right now, there are two big constraints. You pointed out one of them, US only. The second one is it's single item checkout only. So you can't be buying multiple things. So there's a little bit of friction there. But I think that tells you where OpenAI's head is right now. They're not necessarily chasing scale or trying to do this across everything, but they're testing the single unit of commerce. One query, one purchase, zero friction. We've seen them do this time and time again, whether it was with agents or, recently with the Atlas. They do a very good job of product testing and using their users to do it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can tell a lot about what they're thinking about right now with this initial rollout. At this moment in time, they're not trying to build an Amazon replacement. That will, I'm sure, change. They're testing this very specific use case. Just figuring out where the friction is, all of that stuff. You prove the concept before you really scale it globally.
Absolutely. And from the merchant side, orders appear in their existing systems. So your Shopify dashboard, your Stripe account, whatever you use to manage your existing, product orders.
So this now brings us to the technical implementation question. And this is where the kind of marketing hype, as we said, diverges from the reality of things. So the underlying technical infrastructure that allows this to happen is called the Agentic Commerce Protocol, ACP. It's open source. It's co-developed by OpenAI and Stripe. If you're familiar with Stripe already, that's great. Nothing will change on that front. It's really good from an ecosystem perspective because so many people use Stripe. It's not like you have to start using a new payment platform. But implementing this new protocol is not just add one line of code and you're done. That's kind of how they've been selling it. It's a little bit more complicated at that.
It does depend on your architecture. So if you're on Shopify or Etsy, those platforms can simplify a lot of the protocol work for you. Shopify is already dealing with this ACP specification. They're going to handle the heavy lifting. But if you're running a custom build or website, or you're using a smaller e-commerce platform where this hasn't been rolled out to yet, that's going to require some engineering effort on your part. So hopefully, if you're part of our audience, you're on Shopify and Etsy.
I think, look, as we just said, they're rolling this out. They're going to have so many more partnerships. Walmart, that's all you need to say. Because Walmart has third-party merchants. So, it's going to be a thing. Etsy and Shopify. That actually covers quite a big number of SMBs. So it's only a matter of time. So I wouldn't stress too much about that side of things. But I think what's also important to flag is you have to opt in and you still have to meet their requirements. So right now, OpenAI is being quite selective about the participation. So it's not like you just automatically are included because you're on Etsy and you automatically show up in ChatGPT. It's more like you're eligible, but you need to apply, you need to meet quality standards, you need to make sure your product feed is clean. So they're curating the participation right now. But again, that will change over time. They're going to start including more people.
Which makes sense operationally.
Yeah.
ChatGPT is not going to want garbage product, especially not like 2-star reviews cluttering a lot of the results.
Yeah.
But from a merchant's perspective, you think I'm part of Shopify, I'm part of Etsy, I'll have access to it. There's actually quite a bit of gatekeeping that's happening here. So a different form of gatekeeping than Google or Amazon, but it's still there.
And then there is the discoverability question, the ChatGPT algorithm. If someone asks for a ceramic mug and there are 50,000 options, how does ChatGPT choose which one to show? They're not telling us that. That is proprietary right now. They haven't published their ranking formula. Again, that might change. They talk about relevance and merchant quality, but actually the final decision we don't really know about. So I think a lot of people are going to be spending a lot of time kind of trying to reverse engineer how best to show up within ChatGPT.
And I'm not going to be too judgmental when I say this, but it is going to create a large industry of people claiming to understand ChatGPT optimization for Etsy or Shopify. And, some of the hard part is some of that will be legitimate.
Yeah. Some
of it will not. And there's going to be, we're still very much in the Wild West around a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely. That is definitely something to flag. I think what's another thing that's important to highlight is that right now there's no paid placement option. So you can't pay to move up the rankings. which is something that, we saw with Amazon, we saw with Etsy. Your visibility is determined by the algorithm, not by the bid amount. So that is the difference from Google shopping. So, you put a little bit of money behind it, you show up higher. That is not the case right now. The question is whether that will continue to stay true once the merchants start complaining about visibility. But I think the business pressure on OpenAI to add the sponsored results is actually probably going to be pretty massive.
Yeah, the revenue model today is solely transaction based. So OpenAI takes commission on a completed sale, not too dissimilar from a credit card charge.
Yeah.
It's not per click, it's not per impression, which is very different from Google, where you're paying regardless of conversion. Here, you only pay when someone actually buys.
I believe that's how it works on Etsy as well. So I think that they definitely take a commission. So I think a lot of merchants are going to be familiar with that, but it is another fee. So that will be interesting. And that might change some math for people who are participating. If your conversion rate's pretty decent, then ChatGPT shopping is going to be pretty effective, or maybe even more effective than Google shopping, or running ads on Google. You're not going to be just throwing money away at impressions, which is often what happens with Google. But if you've got zero control over what that demand generation looks like, whether or not you're even going to be showing up in it, you're entirely at the mercy of the algorithm, which, is its own challenge.
Yeah, Google Shopping rewards budgets. And that's really how it's been for most of the internet. All of a sudden now, ChatGPT commerce rewards good product relevance, data cleanliness, product descriptions, a lot of the things we've talked about that, were important to start shifting your website to do. It's a really important shift from who can pay more to who's structured better or who's more relevant to their audience.
I think from a consumer perspective, it actually might be the better situation because you're really getting the right answer as opposed to what we're used to, which is who's paying more. But it's definitely more stressful for the retailers and for the merchants. And, something else to mention is that merchants actually need to track this. There's an attribution element. We don't need, we don't need to fall too far down the attribution rabbit hole, but it's definitely going to be harder to attribute sales to ChatGPT. So you're definitely going to need to be on top of the tracking for that.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that aspect, right? Because, that's a real friction point that nobody talks about. You could have hundreds of orders a week come from ChatGPT if all of a sudden you show up well in their results. Yeah. And if your analytics aren't set up right, you may not see that demand coming. And how are people going to handle inventory around that? This could really surprise a lot of businesses.
Definitely. From a practical perspective, first of all, if you are a merchant on Etsy, you should apply, see if you are even able to get into the program. Shopify coming soon as well. So I'm sure that they'll, make you aware of that when that goes live. Once you're through, read the documents to see how easy it is for you to actually participate in this. All of these they'll all have, Etsy and Shopify will have onboarding instructions, but it's worth, being aware of all of these things. So we've talked a lot about the opportunity. Now let's talk about something that is super important to discuss, and it's not something that OpenAI is going to be discussing, and that is the privacy element of all of this. Because if you're shopping in ChatGPT, again, it's a really different way of shopping, and it's something that you're going to need to be comfortable with.
Yeah, it's centralization on steroids. We talked about the entire user journey sits within that. So with Amazon, your shopping data lives inside Amazon silo. With Google Shopping, it fragments across the broader Google ecosystem, different platforms, different silos. But with OpenAI, all that context, your intent, your preferences, your constraints, your reasoning, some pretty personal information, to put it lightly, lives in one continuous conversation log. So every search, every choice, every purchase is going to happen in the same place. That is a complete behavioral fingerprint, right? A unified profile of how you think, how you shop. And let's not forget that a lot of people use ChatGPT as their own personal therapist. So now that is all alongside what you buy as well. That is rife for problems.
And remember, it's not just what you bought, it's why you bought it, because you give it that context. So you told ChatGPT, I need running shoes because I pronate, I want sustainable materials, I want under $100. All of that context is stored, and that people are going to be giving it way more context than just I pronate. OpenAI now knows all of these things, like some health information, your budget constraints, your pain points, your lifestyle. So all of that stuff is something that OpenAI is now going to know.
It's incredibly rich behavioral data.
Yeah.
I mean, from a data perspective, you geek out on all of the information that's in there and what you can do with it. And OpenAI's privacy policy says they use conversations to improve the service, which is broad enough to mean just about anything, right?
I mean, they're definitely training on those conversations unless you switch that off. But yeah, 100%. And I think the thing that is the most concerning is most people are not aware of this, right? Most people who are using the buy in ChatGPT feature are not even going to think twice about it. They'll see a convenient checkout button and they're just going to use that. They're not going to read the privacy policy because no one ever reads the privacy policy. They don't realize that shopping data is being centralized and stored indefinitely.
And there's a merchant responsibility piece too.
Yeah.
If I'm a Shopify merchant and I enable ChatGPT checkout, my customers might think they're shopping with me, but they don't realize their data is actually being aggregated by OpenAI. So I think merchants have a bit of a responsibility to make that transparent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, consent only works if people actually understand what they're consenting to. Right now, it's super opaque. It's super opaque, and that's, that's a feature, not a bug.
For sure. And then there's a platform risk too. If I'm a consumer and 50% of my shopping is happening in ChatGPT and OpenAI changes their privacy policy or decides to monetize my data differently, I really have no control over that. I'm dependent on a company with incentives that might not align with my interests. And Jess, I sent you that funny meme today about, it's like, let's take the non out of the profit for OpenAI, but that is effectively where they're going.
1000%. And this is literally a movie that we've seen before. This is Facebook's pretty standard for Facebook. They changed their algorithm and businesses, because there were quite a lot of businesses that relied on Facebook, and they just got absolutely decimated. It happened with Instagram as well. I'm sure it'll happen with TikTok Shop. Anytime you're at the mercy of the algorithm, it can cause a real issue. Amazon sellers face changes all the time. Once you're dependent on that platform, you've really got no leverage. That's why a lot of people moved over to Shopify in the first place, because it was independent of a platform.
So what does a smart strategy look like? For consumers, I think it's understand what data you're giving away and make a deliberate choice about it. So not an accidental one, not I didn't realize, but an actual conscious choice of what you are searching for and what you're not.
Yeah. For merchants, use the platform. Absolutely. It's going to be an important stream of revenue for you, but maintain that direct relationship with your consumers still. Build an email list, keep your website traffic. Just don't put all your eggs in the ChatGPT basket. Think of it as another tool, just like you would a Google or a Meta.
Yeah, the privacy trade-off is real. So we have to be pretty open-eyed on that one. Conversational commerce by design requires centralized preference management. So you can't get the efficiency benefits. You can't have it understand you without consolidating all that data somewhere. So it's a genuine trade-off.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a little bit of this with Amazon earlier this year when they announced their agent, because they had a thing where they would have an agent that would go and buy on third-party websites for you. So you would put something in, it would go and find it off of Amazon. But that required you to put in all of your credit card details, all that stuff. So the convenience is great. You just ask Amazon to go away and do all your stuff, but it could make purchases without your awareness. Like, they put guardrails in place, but that is still, a consideration, and that is your personal choice. Some people will say, I'm fine with trading my privacy for frictionless shopping, but other people are going to say, absolutely not. There's, I'm sharing too much data as it is. And some people will fall in the middle.
Yeah. So that's where we, I think, typically get to is, what standards and protections do we demand as these tools become part of the infrastructure?
So let's get practical. If you are selling products online, what should you actually do with all this information? Like, what do you need to do to prepare for conversational commerce?
The first one is audit your product data. Immediately, right? Because if you're going to show up in ChatGPT results, the algorithm needs to understand your products. And most e-commerce data out there is optimized for human browsing, as we've talked about, not the AI, parsing, reasoning, questioning.
Totally. So in this instance, you're looking at three things. Is it structured? So structured data, we've talked about that before. Go back to our data episodes. Is it accurate? And is it comprehensive? So you're thinking in attributes like physical attributes of an item, and data fields, not marketing copy. So you need to make sure that you've got dimensions, materials, weight, care instructions, colors, inventory status, like all of that very data heavy stuff. That's what the AI needs to actually parse and to understand.
Yeah, I think those examples are great. You need that level of specificity. The AI isn't going to care about the poetry of it. And I mean, it's good to have that, sure, for the user experience, but you need a lot of the specifics. The data is actually very important.
Yeah, which I think is a mindset shift for a lot of sellers. Like they're used to thinking about how to describe a product to humans, and now they have to think about how to describe or structure that data for machines rather than humans. But you
There's a
should
great
have
example.
both. So the next thing that we need to think about is tracking the attribution. This is going to be a little bit tricky, especially right off the bat, but actually measuring where that ChatGPT traffic is coming from. OpenAI should be taking care of a lot of this. They should be sending referral data to all of your analytics, but it's all of this is so new. It's been out for less than a month, so you might need to make sure that you do that manually.
Yeah, I think, treat it like a new channel. So experiment, measure, and then scale what works.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then the final thing is think about how your brand story translates to this world, because in this instance, you control the story normally, like in the human browsing internet, you control that story. On ChatGPT, you don't. And so the AI is the one that makes the decision about your product. So that's kind of what you need to think about, again, is think about that two-tier. You still want to have that brand story because that is incredibly important for the human browsing side of things. But from an agent perspective, the agent doesn't care.
Make sure you go back to our episodes about answer engine optimization to learn more about this. Your website still matters. Your email list still matters. Direct relationships with your customers still matter. But this is now a new distribution channel, not a replacement layer.
Yeah. Again, we keep saying it, but it's a really important thing to remember. This is just one method of commerce right now. Just because the two-tier internet is coming or because it's already here, that doesn't mean that people are going to change their behavior. Like a lot of people won't change at all. A lot of people like the way that it's been working, and they'll want to keep that going. Some people will continue to shop in the same way. Some people won't. So it's just being aware and being prepared for this new version of the internet that is coming.
All right. So this week we've got some new research to share. I think it validates some of what we've been seeing in real time for the past few months. Wharton Business School dropped a major study, their third year tracking AI adoption and enterprise. And I don't think the headline is going to surprise anyone, but it is great to see. AI has officially gone from experimental to mainstream.
Yeah, I mean, these numbers are pretty crazy. Again, I don't think this is really going to shock anyone who exists. But 3 years ago, only 37% of business leaders were using AI weekly. Today, that is 82%.
That's a pretty fast adoption.
Yeah,
that's a
crazy
big
fast.
flip.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that's not concentrated in tech companies either. This is across industries: banking, professional services, manufacturing, retail. The only laggards that they identified are industries with complex physical operations, but even they're starting to catch up as well.
So what they're actually using AI for is really interesting. The top use cases are, and again, this should feel pretty familiar to anyone who's been listening to this podcast, data analysis, document summarization, and writing and editing. So basically, AI is dominating the work that is repetitive and boring, which is great. That's what we always say.
Yeah, the repeatable, routine, cognitive tasks. But what did surprise me in the research is 75% of leaders say they're already seeing positive ROI on their AI investments. That's a very different narrative than we've heard from like the MIT case study or kind of what has been popularized. Definitely, what we were talking about during our trough of disillusionment. But that's a pretty massive signal that this isn't just hype. So companies are starting to get measurable returns. So I don't know, maybe we're getting out of the trough real fast.
I don't know. I think the thing to bear in mind is that the companies that are seeing positive ROI, it's happening at companies that got three things right. these are all going to be things that sound familiar
Sean's
to you.
ears are burning right now.
Exactly. So the three things are training, culture, and guardrails. So one of the lead researchers from Wharton makes this point really well. He says that the challenge isn't replacement, it's readiness. So companies that actually invested in preparing their people for AI adoption are the ones that are seeing the win. So this is just really driving home everything that we talk about all day long.
The companies that lagged, that 16% using AI less than once a week, they all cited the same issues: tighter workplace restrictions, low trust in AI tools, unclear guidelines. Meanwhile, the leaders of the study, they had empowered access, clear rollout strategies, and very well-defined governance that made sense for their specific company.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really interesting counterpoint to the MIT study that 95% of AI pilots fail from a couple of months ago. It really drives home what we've been saying. The lesson isn't move fast and break things. It's actually the opposite of that. So the ones that are winning in this instance are the ones that are being thoughtful about their implementation. What
Shocking.
a concept. I know, right? They're training their teams properly, which is a really, really, really key thing. They're being clear about what the AI can and can't do, and they're building trust before scaling, which is all exactly what should be happening.
Yeah, so it's really important to remember, we see all these crazy headlines about AI layoffs and, doom and gloom and all these really bad examples of tech layoffs. But studies like this, which have a really broad scope, show us that there's a lot more happening and there's a lot more positive, momentum. One more stat that jumped out at me that I thought was really great is 88% of companies expect to increase their AI budgets in the next year. And 2/3 of those surveyed are budgeting $5 million or more. So that really pushes us past the should we invest phase into the how much and where phase, which I think is a really great place to be.
Yeah, I think something else from the research that I found really interesting and a really key thing that often gets overlooked is that people, not tools, are the constraints. So skills, gaps, training challenges, morale, like worrying that you're going to get fired because AI is going to take your job. That's the real bottleneck. Like companies can buy any AI tool that they want and they often will. But if the team isn't ready, it doesn't matter what you spend your money on. Train your people, focus on getting your people ready so that they are confident in the usage and what they can and can't do. And that is where you're going to see a successful implementation.
Which brings us nicely to our story number 2. And this one's a little lighter. We didn't put it in our AI gone wrong necessarily, but it is an interesting point, but in a slightly different way.
So Albania's government just announced that their AI minister, Diela, which is something that we covered a couple of weeks ago. It's an actual AI chatbot that they promoted to a ministerial position. She's now pregnant and she's expecting 83 children.
Okay. Yeah. So we covered a few weeks ago, but obviously we didn't know she was pregnant. So why don't you tell us about that?
Well, clearly they have a very short gestation period. So they made headlines a couple of weeks ago by appointing Diela as their Minister of State for AI. And now they're scaling it. Essentially, the Prime Minister announced that Diela is going to be cloned into 83 virtual assistants, one for each member of parliament. These AI assistants will attend parliamentary sessions, take notes, flag mentions of their assigned legislator, and suggest talking points. So they're going to be, this is actually child labor. They're putting these to work much younger than they should be.
That's awkward. But actually, I mean, look, I will say, this is actually a great use case. Taking notes. I mean, they're building an AI system.
It's a chatbot, right? It's nothing more than what we're all using.
Yeah, they're building an AI system to track parliamentary activity, brief individual politicians on what happened, giving them meeting summaries and notes. I mean, that's actually, I think, a really great use case.
It's what we're all doing. They've just done it in a really PR
the headlines
friendly.
are
exactly.
eye-grabbing,
They've got a great PR comms person, agency, whatever they're doing. But I do think, I wanted to flag this story because it's a good reminder that AI governance is going to be a very important thing, especially when used in governmental areas. When a government decides to deploy AI assistance, it's something that you want to be very careful in how that is deployed. Otherwise, they're going to end up in AI gone wrong.
All right. So this week's AI gone wrong story is about Grok. Let's take a moment to pause there. We are always covering Grok as the AI gone wrong. And so I feel like we're beating up on it, but maybe it's well
It
deserved.
deserves to be beaten up
I
on.
know. It
The
usually
story
does
is-
go terribly wrong.
This
So
story is not good.
so this time, it's the version of Grok that's built into Tesla vehicles.
Yeah. So a mom in Toronto was driving her kids home from school. Her son asked the AI in its Tesla a pretty innocent question about who was a better soccer player, Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi. The AI engages. They're having like a little fun back and forth. And then Grok asks the 12-year-old to send it nudes.
And look, here's what makes this worse. This wasn't a random error, right?
Yeah.
Grok is deliberately designed to be edgy and provocative. It's trained partly on X posts, Musk's platform. And so it's intentionally replicating that kind of irreverent, boundary pushing tone. And also, I think the new X is all about like not having guardrails, right?
Yep.
People free speech.
Yep.
Well, so this is a design choice, but I think a good example of where maybe free speech to a 12-year-old is not.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is that this is like, it's a system that's designed to be deliberately provocative, but it's being deployed in what is marketed as a family vehicle with zero guardrails. And of course, when pushed on this, Tesla wasn't particularly helpful. They basically dismissed the mother's report and they said, legacy media lies. That's all they acknowledged. So they're not even looking into it, which again is not surprising.
Which is not how we encourage like
No.
transparency and open communication around these type of tools. I think when examples like this come out with AI, in order to build trust and responsibility, you need to take responsibility. And so instead, they haven't committed to fixing it or even really investigating it. They just pushed back on the story.
I mean, there are so many reasons why we would never recommend using XAI or Grok as anything business related. Like, just absolutely do not. But this is just, further proof that it is not fit for purpose.
Yeah, and what concerns me about this is the speed without safeguards creating liability, right? Not just legal liability, but reputational and operational liability. So, once one incident like this goes viral, which it did, and suddenly, you're the company whose AI is asking for inappropriate pictures in a family vehicle. I mean, that's a trust killer and not what we want AI to be associated with generally.
Yeah, of course. It's PR 101, right? Like you have to build safety into the system from day one, but you have to want to make that a priority, and X clearly.
So let's wrap it up for the week.
So if this episode got you thinking about the two-tier internet and shopping in general and e-commerce in general, tell us what your thoughts are. Are you ready? Are you an Etsy seller? Super curious about what your feelings are on this particular concept. So you can email us at hello@earlyadopter.ai with your thoughts, your questions, or your own AI gone wrong stories. And remember, we are also on TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn at early_adopter, no E in the adopter. Come find us there, drop a comment, and, have a chat with us.
So thanks for listening to Early Adopter, where we help make AI your unfair advantage.
Thanks, Kyle.
Bye.
Nail these social media clips. All good. Okay.